Welcome to The First Turn. I'm your host, Hyena, and today, Llama and I are talking about This Week in Warhammer. If you like what you hear, give us a like, comment, subscribe, or share, or let us know if there's something you'd like to hear us talk about. Alright, let's get to it. So, This Week in Warhammer. Imagine just what this segment's called, right? This Week in Warhammer.
This Week in Warhammer.
We are 1 week out from the preview.
Right, at the US Open event. Yep.
So that is next Thursday, which I think we will do maybe a live stream for that.
I think we should.
A pretty reasonable time. It's running around 7:30 Central, so I think we can do that. So catch us next week live. We'll stream on YouTube.
Yeah.
If you want to join us for that. Maybe we'll arrange a easier watching situation for us this time. Some drinks, something. Yep. You know, I have an idea for streaming from the couch. That'd be nice. But yeah, so that's next Thursday.
We could maybe even see if a third person could come along, one of our other folks.
That'd be super sweet. But I'm excited about that because we're going to see what's in the new box. And I'm sure what is in there is not everything. Maybe we'll give some hints at what's to come beyond that.
And while the preview is going to be 2 days, Age of Sigmar is all day one, and I think that's what we're most interested in, or that's the biggest news.
Yeah.
Because they are also doing stuff for 40k, Necromunda.
That's on Saturday.
Kill Team and something.
We might just recap that.
Yeah.
Because right now, my mind is all about AOS.
Yep. And it's getting a day all by itself.
Bottom line. Yep. So it's going to be big. It's going to be exciting. If you're excited about it too, let us know and join us. Mm-hmm. We did get a little more information. I think it was just today. The week's been a little slow because we've got Tau coming out. We've got Chaos was announced and it's coming out. So we got some point changes and some detachment previews and whatnot. Yeah,
we're injecting 3 new armies into the mix now. So 40k meta will change. But
we also got a glimpse at one of the new weapon teams for Skaven, which is the Jezzails. I think they look
the rat snipers.
I like the more grounded look to the Skaven. Mm-hmm. I will say that. I know there's the Docs of the World, which by that we mean an old timer who is around locally occasionally. Who every time something new comes out, he's like, "Well, I like the old one." Mm-hmm. And we look at the model from 20 years ago, and we're looking at it like, how? What are you talking
objectively
about?
Just how?
Just how? He said that about Gazkul.
Yeah.
When the new Gaz came out. This model right here. It's big and amazing and
right.
Perfect.
I think it was model of the year for that one.
And he's like, I like the old one. You look at the old one, it's like, this guy's wearing cereal boxes. And he's the size, like he's smaller than a Terminator. Like, what are you talking about? You like the, what? How?
Right.
It just doesn't make any sense. But we've been waiting for updates to some Skaven models, specifically these Jezzail teams, for 25 years. Yeah. And I swear, the first comment I saw when I went on to Reddit, I looked and see, here's the reveal article. First comment's like, old one looks better. It's like, no, it doesn't.
It doesn't.
What are you talking about? Like, the old one looks like he's wielding like a gigantic like revolver. Right. And like, it's just so chunky. It's like, what are you talking about?
Well, and even things like any attempt at expression they tried to sculpt in the face, any attempt at features having realistic proportions are just so bad on those old things. And I know some of it's trolls.
It could be. It very well could be. But I believe some people
romanticize, because they remember when they were 8 years old or 12 years old and they first saw it.
Absolutely. I can relate to that. Yep. When I first started, I was maybe 9 or 10 when I played my first Warhammer game.
Yep.
And I remember it was at my buddy Nick's house. We played Necrons versus Tyranids. The old like, I don't know, snowman on legs, Tyranid monsters. With
Those are the old Tyranid warriors.
Really, really, really old ones. But I remember him and his Necrons and just how cool they were, back then. Like, man, those were awesome. And then, like, flash forward decades, and I look at the old Necrons and I'm like, what was I thinking?
Yeah.
It's romanticizing it because it was so cool back then.
Yep.
It didn't matter what they looked like. You're remembering the thought and the feeling of them.
The moment.
You're not, like, actually objectively looking at the physical object. And if you look at the physical object now, you realize how bad it was. And it was. I'm sorry.
We did that with the new Warlock.
Those grin teeth, like weird metal, not even skeletons. They were just like Terminators without skin. You know, like they were
Like
the
movie
The
Terminator.
The Terminator,
Yeah.
right, exactly. D1000. No.
Yeah.
And then their bikers were just like riding these recliners that had these little like hexagons at the bottom. I don't know. It didn't make any sense. The design was so wild. New Necrons are amazing.
Yeah.
By comparison, hands down.
It's not even close.
There's no one I'd like laugh you out of the room if you said I prefer the old Necrons.
And even just from the negative space, the nuance of the detail, and again proportions, like crispness, everything.
Yeah.
So aside from just the quality of models they're able to produce, even the design itself, artistically, is just so much better.
Yeah.
If you were to relate that to another genre, I'm going to go back a little bit here. It's like when the new version of It came out, Chapter 1 and 2. And there were a ton of people. Now, they got great reviews, but there were a ton of people who go, I remember being more scared by the original TV one that they did.
Is it the one with
Tim Curry.
Tim Curry.
In 1990. And it was a 2-part TV thing. And then now I have since rewatched that old thing. And let me tell you, it is not scary ever, and it doesn't hold up ever.
Yeah.
That's not Tim Curry's fault. He played the heck out of that character. But when you talk to these people, like, well, I was terrified when I saw it. I go, how old were you when you saw it? And they're like, I was 9. Okay, have you seen it again since? Well, no, it would ruin it for me. Okay, so you were scared when you were 9. Yeah. You're reminiscing on that.
You know what he reminds me of, Tim Curry, in that? I mean, not specifically, but I remember there's where like you see his hands. They're like weird lizard hands.
Yeah.
It reminds me of the weird pizza hands from the Super Mario Super Show. There's an episode where the guy gets like possessed by a pizza spirit or something crazy. Something just insane. Right. Luigi gets like possessed. Yep. That's what it reminds me. It's like, how can you take this seriously? Yeah. It's silly.
And it was so tame because it had to be made for TV. Right. And so anyway, same idea. They're reminiscing that moment in the basement when they were a kid.
Yeah.
And that's the thought they have about it, thinking it's good.
Yeah.
But it's the same with those old models. Some of those people, I bet you, haven't even looked at those old models since then. But we always do that. And you look at it and it was like, oh, wow, there was nothing about that old kit that looked good even before we had what the new one looked like.
Right.
And then we get this new one and it's like, oh, it's perfect. It's exactly a Giselle team.
Yeah.
Updated, clean, plastic.
Yeah. It looks great. Again, they've pivoting their art style, even from some of the models they released 2 years ago, right? Because there was a Warlock Bombardier, there were some Underworld kill teams that had Skaven, and even compared to those, they look even more updated.
Yep.
Right. I want to say the standalone Skaven Assassin, the Deathmaster, probably fits very well in this aesthetic line. Yeah. But even like the Warlock Bombardier doesn't really fit this aesthetic anymore. He's still a little too cartoony and still a little too short-legged and chunky. These ones are like, their legs are longer, their arms are longer, their snouts are like leaner. Yep. There's more character in these Skaven than even very recent models.
Well, and they lend, again, when we've talked about how much better they do at human proportions and then scaling up the Marines, of course, Primaris style. Well, now we're seeing it even with this. You've got a rat humanoid and its proportions feel rat-like. Yeah. And so now we're going to have those on the battlefield next to monstrous Stormcast Eternals or Chaos Chosen, but then also next to like human citizens from Cities of Sigmar. And it's just going to look so much better that way.
Yeah. And yeah, man, those models look great. Because they showed off like 3 of them. There's 3 in the kit. I think there's other options, maybe even other gun profiles.
It looked like there were 2 different backpacks too.
Yeah, there's different backpacks. There's different like barrel fronts to the guns. I have no idea if they're going to plan on having different weapon profiles. You only get to see the one gun option actually in the video. There's not a still of it. And so I'm wondering if maybe these are in the starter box.
Oh, maybe.
And they only have one build, but then when the kit comes out, they'll have extra bits.
Might even make an alternate gun entirely.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Like you'll have 2 war scrolls.
We haven't seen that yet.
Yeah.
Right? A lot of the rumors and the teasers we've seen so far have been weapon options are kind of aesthetic. So
currently,
Liberators they showed off had sword or weapon or hand weapon and shield or 2 hand weapons were the same profile, same save, same number of attacks, same damage output, that kind of thing. And so it was like, oh well, that's going to be purely aesthetic. Maybe initially.
I think index wise it probably is.
Down the line, who knows?
Yeah, right? Battletome they can flesh it out all they want.
Conceptually, to me, if you have different options for weapons, they should do probably different things.
Yep.
Right. It makes it simpler if they don't, but.
Well, to me, it's one thing if the weapon just looks different.
Right.
But if you're talking about
sword
whether
compared to a hammer compared to an axe.
But if you're talking about 2 weapons versus a weapon and shield,
Yeah.
I think those definitely should do different things.
Right.
And I will predict that when battle tomes start coming out, that will be the case. I think maybe early on they'll just give you a simplified profile to play.
Yeah, which absolutely fine with.
Yep.
I've got so many liberators in this example that it doesn't matter.
But that everything about that Giselle kit is just perfectly what you imagine.
Yeah.
It actually even looks better than the video game render in Total War.
Yeah.
Like
really
that
does.
model's just even better than that, which was better than the old model.
Another comment I had was the weapon looks too clean to be a Skaven weapon. What are you talking about? It's made up of like beat up pieces of metal.
Yeah, so paint it dirty.
Look how beat up that barrel of that gun is. Like,
You know what though? When the Iron Jaws first dropped, I saw people say that about the new brutes. They were like, "Well, that bright candy yellow armor, it looks too clean." And I was like, "Well, you're looking at the paint job.
Yeah.
Look at the bare plastic." And what I used to do then in the gotcha moments I enjoyed on the internet, it was you put the bare plastic image up, and I put the bare plastic image up of like an old Warhammer Fantasy orc.
Mm-hmm.
And the old Warhammer Fantasy orc had perfectly clean, straight, no dent, no scratch armor, whereas these Iron Jaws ones have what look like hand-beaten, hammer-smacked armor. It's like, ignore the paint job.
Yeah.
Look at it when it's in the bare plastic.
But a lot of people can't do that because a lot of people are bad painters. They don't understand that the paint job can change. You can add more weathering to it. You can add chipping. You could change the color, and you know it won't look as clean as it looks. But you know, say la vie. So we had that. We had it was a teaser this week that actually made it. Maybe it was technically might have been Seraphim.
Oh, I don't know. The rumor engine.
This rumor engine looks very much like just the back of a Saurus warrior.
A scaled monster.
Because Saurus warriors, the new ones have this kind of thing where like some of their spikes are like almost look like they're capped in metal, like this. So I wonder. I don't know. Super weird. Super weird.
I mean, in the rumor engine anymore. I mean that
maybe if it was new Tomb Guard or not Tomb Guard, Saurus Guard.
Temple Guard.
Temple Guard. Well, they used to be called Temple Guard. Now they're called Saurus Guard.
Maybe.
But yes.
Yeah, or I mean, with the rumor engine, that could even be an Underworld's warband. Like it's just so hard to predict that.
Yeah. So we had that, which I thought that was an interesting aside, and then we had an article today about battlefield, like terrain, which
AOS terrain.
Again, it was one of the things where I feel like it had the most room for improvement, right? With 3rd edition of AOS, terrain was always weak. You basically could play the game without it. Right, because it was so little impact.
Mm-hmm.
Like who cares about terrain in that game? The guy's up the building. All right, well I'll move 5 inches. Well he's 8 inches up. Well I'll move 5 inches towards him and be floating, however many inches in the air, 3 inches below him. Then it's like that's silly. I don't know. It was a very like terrain light kind of game. Unless terrain mattered immensely through like Sylvanath where they had wildwoods and stuff.
Yeah, was
insane because they needed those. There's a lot of like non-interactive gameplay involving Sylvanath, and I'm glad that kind of stuff will probably be going away. So I'm excited about that too. But we had seen that terrain was destructible in a previous article, which was like, okay, some terrain, faction terrain, in the same way that summonable spells and invocations and stuff have wound profiles now. You can just kill them instead of banishing with an unbind. Faction terrain can be destroyed. So now we've got what happens for normal terrain on the battlefield, right? What does that look like? And it is different, and I think different in a lot of very subtle ways that a lot of people may not realize. What matters with these rulings. So there were very few categorizations of terrain in AOS prior. If you were just on a thing, you were in cover unless you were a monster or you had 10 or more wounds. And then, like, if you had a barricade, if you were on one side of it and the opponent was the other side, you had cover. Like, there were so few things that interacted that it was like, just ignore it. Like, it doesn't matter. Well, now they've got what are these universal terrain features, terrain abilities, terrain traits, whatever you want to call them, and they fall in 5 categories. And every piece of terrain will have a combination of these kind of things.
Yep.
Some of them will even have, won't be in the rule book, and you have to like assign them yourself. If it's not one of the specific things that they've detailed, you say, okay, well, what's relevant for this piece of terrain? Well, maybe every terrain provides cover. That's just a thing now.
Yep.
Sometimes if there's like bits where you really can't stand, you'll say, hey, this is impassable. Like you can't go over that. Or if it's like a pit, it's like, no, you can't go over this unless you can fly or something. Obscuring means you can't shoot through it. So like forests and things like that, or clouds of smoke or geysers or something, maybe we might have obscuring as a feature, so you can't shoot through it. Places of power were something that was in the game multiple editions and different iterations. This one I feel like is similar to how one of the mysterious terrains worked. Maybe it's a mystical or arcane as a mysterious terrain type allows you to cast and unbind while channeling power from the point, which is super cool. For armies that don't have like unbinds or banishes for enemy spells, if you have a piece of terrain that's a place of power, you can say, well, this non-wizard hero is going to attempt to channel the power and then unbind that spell. Great change. I love that. And then for things where maybe there's spikes or statues or something where you really can't place a model, you might say, this is unstable. You can move through it and whatever.
You just can't end
you
move
can't
on
end
it,
or move up on top of any of the things. Unless it's like the ground floor. You know, maybe there's like some parapets and stuff above. It's like you can't land up there. You can only land down here. Cool. I think that covers most of the like terrain types we've seen.
Yep.
You know, in our own collections.
And
like, that covers.
Well, and one thing they can do to just make sure that it's consistent and as tight as everything else we've seen is just every piece of terrain has to have one or more of these keywords.
Right.
And then you never have to worry about it.
Yep.
And for tournament packets, I'm sure they'll do that. Now they did say match play will have a more advanced addition to terrain stuff.
Well, they also showed that there are example layouts where you don't even set up your own terrain. You use this layout of terrain and it tells you exactly what they are. This is a small place of power. Right. This is a large obscuring terrain.
And I imagine that's something that TOs will follow.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So super cool.
Then you can prepare players like here's what the terrain's going to be.
Well, and then the biggest change I think something that 40K could use is this basically a ruling that says if you're up on top of a terrain feature and you can't be reached from the ground because something can't fit up there with you.
Yeah, you've covered your unit or whatever has covered the whole surface and nothing can get up there.
So there's no more invisible boxes.
Right.
Basically is what we're saying. It's not in here. You count as not really garrisoning the building, but you are the terrain, basically, in terms of footprint. And so if you're blocking and no one can get up with you, they have to get within half an inch of the terrain piece in order to attack you.
And then they get to fight you. Yep.
Awesome.
Which we have talked about. 40K needs that so bad because you still, 3 editions later, have 30-foot tall monsters and 60-foot tall vehicles that walk up to a building and that guard squad's on the 3rd floor. And they just shake their fist at them.
They're 5.5 inches up from base to base. They're out of my
I can't get them.
Range. I can't attack them.
I'm looking right at
them.
They're
like 2 or 3 inches above the guardsman's head. Yeah. It's silly. But I do have questions about that one that I've already thought of that I think would need clarification when maybe they'll explain it when the core rules come out, right? But I have questions already with this little blurb they give, mostly involving things like, well, what if you were on a terrain piece and you were kind of at the back of it, right? And you're little guys, but you're on the top of the terrain, kind of in the back, and they're trying to charge you from the other side, and they can't fit up there because they're an Archaeon. They're on a gargantuan pie plate. Well, no matter what, then Archaeon can attack you from 10 inches away on the other side of the terrain because he can never fit where you are. Does he get to just attack you from over there? That seems a little
because he's
silly.
half an inch from the terrain piece.
Yeah, that seems a little silly. So like I would need some clarification for like the limits of it, right? Because like in the example they give, it's like a cannon crew is up on top of a building that's exactly the size of the base of the cannon crew, and this Gargant's like, well, yeah, I clearly can't fit up there because you're taking up the whole space. So he's like, I'm gonna attack you from down here. I get it within half an inch of the terrain feature. But no matter how much space was left on the top of that building, that Gargant's not fitting up there.
Nope.
So like, say the terrain piece was less than twice as wide as that, but still much, much larger. The Gargant still can't fit up there. Does he get to attack them from anywhere around the building? Not crazy about that.
I mean, I suppose they will have to clarify that, even though when I consider the average terrain layout for AOS, it's rare that you have a honkin' piece of terrain, but you could.
But you could. That's the key. And so I wonder when that'll come up, right?
Yeah.
Now, I will say it is a half-inch range, which is a big deal because engagement range in the game is now 3 inches. Mm-hmm. Well, it always kind of has been 3 inches, but you get to fight and reach within 3. And so maybe that's to try to account for the fact that the engagement range is 3 inches. Maybe there'll be a clarification that says if you get within half an inch of the terrain piece and within 3 inches horizontally of the thing, you can fight them. If they're more than 3 inches away horizontally, even though you're within a half an inch, maybe you can't fight them because they're too far away in the building. Maybe something like that. But we'll see. We'll see.
There'll be people who, at the very least,
Yeah.
until that's clarified, take advantage of it, I'm sure.
But again, then you just need to move around the side of the building where you're closer to them. Like, unless you're in a 9-inch wide building, and you're a one guy in the middle, and the base can't fit, whatever. There will be very few examples of times when you can't be reached by something.
Yep.
You'd have to try really hard and have really obscure.
The terrain would also have to really be big.
Exactly. So we'll see. But that's it. I need more information on that one. Because while I like that, I can see it being abused in a negative way.
Yep.
An narrative way that breaks the immersion of the game, and it's like, well, this doesn't make sense logically in terms of how the mechanics.
Well, yeah, because you could either have the person in the building do this where I have to get on the side they're on or whatever, and so now I have to spend another movement to remove my giant here, and then that guy just moves the unit.
But you know what? That could absolutely happen. If you're hiding from a giant in a building and he's trying to circle the building, trying to get you, and you're just running around inside the building hiding from him, I feel like that's pretty thematic.
But you need game mechanics to just function.
Correct.
You're right. And it's or abuse the other way where they get out of needing to make a great big charge because the huge building is 11 inches across, but I'm within a half inch of it. So even though your unit's still way out of my charge range, I still get to whack you because I'm, And then people will just be like, well, I'm never going to hold up in terrain then.
Right.
And now it's useless. You can't have it be useless either.
Exactly. So, like I said, more information will be coming for that.
Did everybody get confused listening to that? Because we explained hypotheticals.
Hypotheticals using figures and diagrams with their hands that you cannot see.
But
that would have helped.
Clear as day.
Yep. And then tomorrow, they told us at the end of the article, we're going to hear more about the setting, which is good. World building is always great. It's been a long time coming, right? Books are fine for world building, but the degree of canon for some books is questionable, right?
For novels, yeah.
Yes, every book, everything that happens, lore friendly. I mean, there's different writers. I mean, a lot of it has to get approved, but I feel like something conflicts sometimes.
Sure.
And, it's official lore coming out about things and summarizing a lot of the novels. I think is a great start especially for a new edition. Mostly because we need to know what was important that we did or did not read in these books, right? They did a really good one for what the realms were a few weeks ago, and they summarized some of the stories in a way that I did not interpret them. It was different than how the summaries were such that it's I remember the events a little different than that. That's not the information I extrapolated from hearing that story. But if that's how they intended it to be read, that's interesting to me. Yeah,
and it sounds like it's going to feature a lot of the regular folk around the Mortal Realms, whereas the entirety of the Dawnbringer Crusade, which was countless short stories, showed us what a lot of the major players are up to. So that was also world building. Big fan of that.
And I love those. Yeah. Those 30 or 40 short stories they do every couple of years as a campaign is great for world building.
Yep.
They did it for the malign portents. That was super cool. That's where we first learned about the giant crab towers that the Free Guild used to expand the city walls. Super cool. I want to know where those are. Cogforts is what they were called. They're basically gigantic walking watchtowers. Mm-hmm. They're huge. And they've got cannons on top and stuff, and they slowly move, and they build city behind them as the whole line of them move out and they expand the cities. Super cool. But yes, we'll hear more lore stuff tomorrow, which is fun. And I'm sure sometime between now and next week we'll see some other teasers of some other models.
I'm sure Monday. They seem to always give us one, yeah.
Yep. But while that's coming along, we got a little bit of 40K news. We had a points drop for Tal for their book coming out this weekend. A lot of points down, which is good.
It was mostly green.
Which, when we saw the point values when the collector's edition book came out 8 weeks ago,
right.
The points were a little high. Looking at the different, especially the different crisis suit loadouts that they have now, because there's three different units of crisis suits with different set loadouts, we'll call them. Even though there's a little bit of options, but they're mostly set in what you can bring gun wise. You can't load up every crisis suit with triple gun of a certain type anymore. Great, good. Yep. Because what sucked, having to buy 27 cyclical ion blasters,
which you can't,
for a kit that did not include the gun.
Yep,
that was absurd. And so that's kind of out. So rip everyone who bought or pre-printed a bunch of them and can't use them anymore. Sorry.
Yeah.
Should have seen it coming, but you needed to have it if you were playing
competitive Tau.
Yeah. Then you had to do it. But now that's gone. The points were a little over. They've all kind of come down. Lots of green in terms of points costs, which is good because it needed it. I'm a little sad they cut all my Riptides from Forge World. All the Forge World guys are out.
Yeah.
So this guy.
Closing Time is the song that plays over the map.
Waiting to see what his rules were going to be for this new version. I was like, oh man, if he was 430 points, normal Riptide's like 180. I wonder what he's going to be. In 0, he's out.
Dash.
Yeah, Dash, he's gone. You can't play him.
You just play him as a Riptide now.
You could. Yeah, it'd be fine. So disappointing.
Yeah.
So I own several. But it's fine.
I somehow still have the Hyrule. They still have points for those. Yeah. Even though they were...
Well, they're not cutting everything all the time.
No.
So, like, they cut that stuff. The last time they did a cut, they cut the hazard suits.
Yeah.
They cut all the old crude stuff before that. There is still, like, 4 models from Forge World that are still in, though.
Yeah.
They still have the Manta.
Yep.
2,100 point Manta. Still has rules, points in that.
Squeak that in.
The big, super heavy other flyers are still in. They did cut the Tetras, too. That was something I'm glad about because they were abusive in rules-wise. Last Forge World units usually are. So they're gone now, which is good. And something else was in.
Is the Taunar Supremacy suit still
Taunar Supremacy suit, yeah. So those big guys are still...
I mean, I suppose for turns, they cut the Malanthrope, they cut the Crusher and Scythe versions of Carnifex. They cut the weird spores that they used to make for them.
Mucilid?
Yeah, and then now they're down to just...
Well, they also cut the Malanthrope?
Nope. No. Yeah, Malanthrope.
The big one. The one that doubled as both a Psyker... It was both a Venomthrope and a Neurothrope.
Kinda, yeah.
Kinda, like a mix.
Yep. Yeah, he was cut, and then the Carnifex variants were cut, and then the weird... Now, Mucilid still exists. That comes out of the Sporocyst. It's... It had another name.
They were like big, weird, like mines.
Yep.
Is that one still in?
There's a plastic one.
Yeah, okay.
And then there was a Forge World variant that was also weird looking. That's gone.
Gotcha.
But now they're down to the 2 Hyrudules, the Haradon and the whatever.
Harpy? No, the Harpy.
The
big one.
Crawly one.
Haradon. Oh, the Hierophant.
Yeah.
Everything starts with an H. But...
Yeah, and it's just, and these were all made circa 3rd ed. Yeah. I think they're ugly. I don't even like when I watch people do one of those kits.
They remind me of the armor.
Oh, and they cut the Dimakaran.
Oh, Dimakaran's gone, I thought.
Yeah, they cut it.
Yeah, okay, yeah, he's out. That's unfortunate. But I like that kit. Because he was one of the newest Tyranid monsters.
He was one of the latest ones they did.
They cut him like first.
Yeah.
But when you look at the old Tyranid, or these Tyranid resin beasts, they look so much like the old like armor cast Titans.
Yeah.
I mean, not exactly, but it has that same feel. Where I'm like, this is from a different time.
It is.
It's so clear. This does not fit the aesthetic.
And it's like, even if I own one, I don't feel after this many years I'm out the money.
Right.
And I would just rather it's never an option, because I just don't want some FAQ, some chapter approved season, something to come along and people forget about it, and that forgeable unit makes its way in because it's randomly too good now.
Yeah.
And I'd just rather they were all legends.
I agree.
Just, it's like either keep them all or dump them all, like for me.
But so we had that, which is good. And then we also had a little bit of a teaser of the Chaos Space Marines.
But that could make Tau, because people were Eeyore about him, them. They were like, oh, Kroot's the only thing you can play, and then some one thing maybe in the army. But now that those points drops, I didn't see what they were before.
Right.
But
a lot of the deltas are like -10, -20 all across the board.
Yeah.
It's pretty nuts.
So enough of it adds up to.
It's a lot of points. Let me see if I can remember. Let me pull it up here and see if
and while you're doing that, I just want to say, when it comes to points drops, I think the issue with how fast things are released now and how quick we go from one edition to the next creates a situation where players have memories. And so even though Games Workshop tries to claim with the launch of a new edition of either Age of Sigmar or Warhammer 40k, we're going to generally raise the points cost of everything, so there's fewer models on the table, more difficult choices in list building. People cheer for it until it comes out, and then they whine that everything's too expensive because this is 35 points and it was only 25 points last edition. And then eventually GW has to tick it all down because nobody's playing it.
Right. Well, all right, so here we go. Yeah, it doesn't have the deltas. I wish that was one thing I would say
Sigmar did do that,
as in a side when you make these, put some deltas in there. So let us know how much they're changing by. It's a significant amount per unit being changed. The only thing that changes is the Sunforged Battlesuit, which I believe is the Melta ones. They are now the most expensive one. They were not the most expensive ones before. So it's like, good.
But I think in the same vein as what we saw with Dark Angels, Custodes, and Tyranids in their last updates, it was just green, just down, down, down.
Yeah, they were priced too high. I don't know when they wrote the points. They were off from the start.
But again, they might have written it when they had that mindset that they were going to make everything more expensive. But then you launched like Necrons and stuff early that were not that low, or I mean not that high, and so now they have to just everything's going to come back down to where we recognize it.
Yeah.
And I think people are always going to do that when we go on to eventually 11th edition. People are going to remember what these Tau units cost now. Mm-hmm. And if they see them up in the next, I missed it when they were this price. And then eventually no one will play it. And then they'll have to lower points again.
Fine, we'll lower them.
Yep.
Yeah. So, I mean, a lot of the points actually went back to where they were. Now that I'm looking at it, which is fine. That's what it is.
Any list ideas that you have besides Kroot?
I mean, Vespids are really cheap now, too. I do like my like auxiliary units. You have to run a lot of Kroot to make a Kroot army. I'm not willing to do that yet. Because it's still a lot of painting to have to do. You know.
I think they're in a similar boat to Dark Oath, really, with Slaves to Darkness and Age of Sigmar. It's like you can run a module of them.
Yep.
Because to make a whole army of them, you'd need...
Because they need synergy amongst themselves.
Yeah.
And so you need to have a contingent of them in order to make them work. So you'd have to have 500 or 600 points of them.
But to play a whole army of it, you need so many models.
Triple that. Yeah, it'd be insane. And then they don't have solutions for certain things. Because their highest strength gun is like 7.
Mm-hmm.
So that doesn't work.
Nope.
The Crisis suits, which again were priced wrong when they first, were recreated and as teams, are reasonable now. We're looking at the generalist loadout is 50 points a model, which is still pricey, but it's no 65 points a model.
What are they, 5 wounds though?
5 or 6. I can't remember. Mostly because they used to have the ability to increase their wounds by taking drones. I think they took that away now. You can only take 1 drone, so you can only increase your wounds by 1. I think they're like a 5 wound model now instead of a 6. They're base 4. They were at least 4 up to 5 or 6. So I don't recall. But that happened. Like I said, we also had a little bit of a teaser of what the one of the new detachments, a couple of the new detachments, I guess, from Chaos Space Marines looks.
They're
like.
Gonna have 8.
They're gonna have 8 of them.
8 of them.
Which is cool. I mean, similar to Space Marines, right? Like there's tons of chapters represented in the book. This has tons of legions.
And they've fulfilled their cheeky thing of the 8-pointed star, right?
Yep, yeah, absolutely. And so I think it's neat that they have so many ways to play. I saw a little bit of a spoiler about Fashtor's detachment, and it looked pretty good. Lots of like Demon Engine heavy, as you would expect. It looked pretty decent. I'm excited about
I hope he's better.
Yeah,
I hope he's better.
I hope there's just more of the ways to play. People don't just settle on one.
Well, what always surprises me with Chaos Space Marines, every edition, except for the 3.5 that people over-romanticize, it was miserable for the rest of the players, by the way. But anyway, is that Chaos Space Marines have the second largest variety of models after Space Marines.
Yep.
But every season, every edition, they almost always just end up reduced down to one way to play them. And it always ends up something that doesn't end up looking like Chaos Space Marines on the table. Mm-hmm. It ends up like a cultist bomb or a demon bomb or a pile of vehicles. And it ends up not a nice mix of stuff. Whereas usually with Space Marines, you can kind of find a way to do that. So I agree with you. I hope there's like 4 of the detachments that see regular play or something. Or at least they're all worth trying.
Yep, I agree. Like, that many ways to play, like, I would get bored playing one way.
Yep.
I would hope that, like, Index, Chaos Space Marines, I feel like people figured out what the best thing was, and it's just boring. You know, like, have more things to do, more things to try. This should do that. We had a meta watch, which we'll get into about Warcry, because I didn't realize there was a meta.
Yeah, I didn't know.
I didn't know there was a competitive Warcry. I thought it was very like narrative of the game.
That's what I thought. I thought it was like Necromunda. But
I guess it's getting a balance patch. It's just like, okay, neat. But that's basically all we've got for news for this week. But
it's good that they keep their eyeball on even that.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know,
it's. I guess there's one last thing to talk about, and that was the world getting more expensive.
Yep.
Hobby stuff.
3 to 5%.
Is not immune to that.
Right.
Some places are getting hit harder just because of differences in currency and how they compare to one another.
Well, and customs and shipping logistics, like Australia, always has to deal with it.
Big time.
Yeah.
But prices are going up again here in June, which 3 to 5% is pretty small. If that's the case, we're looking at $2 or $3 per kit. It's like, well, that sucks.
Yeah.
It's a hobby, like.
Right.
I'm more upset about things like food going up $2 or $3 per item.
Right, because I have to get those every week.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I don't have to buy new Warhammer models.
No.
And it's not going to make me say, well, finally time to commit to 3D printing. That's too much fucking work.
Yep.
Like, I don't know if you've ever 3D printed. I have. Mm-hmm. And it is so time consuming. It's almost not worth the effort sometimes. 3D print things. It's like, I'd rather just give me the kit. I'll just buy it. But like, when you're an adult, like you're having to spend money on things that are necessities.
Yep.
And then you've got extra income to spend on fun.
Yep.
Right? Like, is a couple extra dollars going to stop you from buying some Warhammer?
Well, an example they gave was like most $50 kits are going to be like $52 or $51.50 US. Yeah. And it was like, okay, well, whatever.
Right. That's negligible to me.
Yep.
A new starter kit, instead of being $210, is going to be $215 or $220.
Yep.
Okay.
And when
those prices were nebulous anyway.
And when that happened, the people did the rounds of screaming and raging, and it's like if that $1.50 is like your breaking point, then like,
good Lord. Oh, that reminds me. The other day at the store, a guy came up, and there's a minimum for how much you'll take a card order for.
Right, because it costs the store owner to run the card.
It costs the store money to run a card.
Mm-hmm.
Every single transaction costs something. This guy's never listened to this, so it doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. I don't even know his name, but he came up and was like, "I want a drink. Give me a Gatorade." I was like, "All right, well that's $1.50. My minimum is $2.50." And he just blankly looked at me, and he's like, then handed me my card. Hit the card. I'm like, "I need you to spend more money before I can run your card. You're $1 short. You want something else?" And he's like, "Give me this," and I'm like, "All right, well that's 75 cents."
You need a quarter.
You need a quarter. And so, like, he, got something that was like, okay, we're at $3. He's like, well, the minimum was $2.50. It's like, yep, $3 is more than that. He's like, ugh. And he hands me the card. He's just like pissy. And it's like, dude, it's 50 cents, like, or $1. Like, what are you? Holy crap! Like, it's insane to me. Like, that small amount of money. It's like, this is negligible. I eat that much money like daily, accidentally, probably.
Right. Yeah.
Or I lose it. Not eat it. I lose it. I don't. It's like that's such a small amount of money.
And we're not here to give people financial advice.
We're not.
But it's I think what happens is, like, especially if you're on a cell phone, and so you have apps and games on there, mm-hmm. Or you simply have access to your money to shop online. What happens is, like, people nickel and dime themselves in so many ways, mm-hmm. and then they're out and they'll blame everything under the sun, but they're never looking at how much they really have versus what's going out. And so I've seen people make comments like that guy, where it's even, they saw a video where someone was using a particular paint color and brand, and they're like, I can't actually afford to buy a pot of paint right now, like $4, mm-hmm. right? And it's because of stuff like that. It's, they maybe have just fretted it away and didn't realize it. Yeah. You go to the convenience store every day and buy that $3.50 drink, or you go to drive-through at Starbucks. Mm-hmm. You bought that 1.99 thing on that app to play the game a little better this time, and it's like all of a sudden, you can't. Yeah. Running $3 on a card or buying a $4 pot of paint is all of a sudden like, I can't. Yeah.
Which, again, I'm not.
Yep.
Shaming him for not having money.
Nope.
But
we don't know the situation.
Right.
Yeah.
But the fact that he's like, I'm already planning on spending $1.50.
Right.
I can't upgrade that to $2.50. That's too much for me. Like, not like he couldn't do it, because he did do it.
Yeah.
But he was pissed off about it. It's like, don't buy the thing then. Like
you don't have to.
I'm not going to run your
We
car.
still have time to give this back.
Yeah, right? Exactly. I don't know. It was fine. But I feel like that's with this. If I'm spending $50 compared to $51.50,
right, that
amount of money is negligible to me.
Right.
If I've already committed and I've already set aside money to buy that.
Yeah. If I've decided a new kit is in the works for me,
right.
That 3 to 5%'s not what's going to stop me from getting it.
Exactly. Even across like an entire army, right? So say I spent $1,000 on an army. 3% increase is $30.
Right. Going from 1,000 to 1,030 is not the breaker.
Right.
And depending on the store owner, you could probably haggle a bit when you're buying that much.
Right. And so it's like...
It does suck. It does
suck. If
suck.
they announced a 30% increase,
then
it'd be like, whoa, too much. What's going on here?
And there was a moment when they went from 2nd to 3rd edition 40K where they did that, where they made the announcement, and then they went years not talking to us. They dropped the points by 20% across the board and raised the average kit cost by 25%. And like that was a big double dip that changed things for a while. But this is just like a part of inflation in life. Yeah. Now, that aside, on a subject we always talk about, I bet they'd save an enormous cost if they stopped printing codexes and battle tomes and just did digital. But it sucks. It's just not breaking. Right. And they said, I think they said
it was two within 2 years. They did it twice.
And I think they said all their paints are staying the same right now. This was just model kits. Yeah. But yeah, it does stink. But even their materials cost more now. Like it costs them more to get cardboard.
Cardboard's insane.
Yeah. And then shipping is insane right now. So, I mean, even when you just go into like the post office and I just have a box to send to somebody for something and it's like, wow, my cheapest option's like $17.50. Like, what happened?
Yeah, I'll just drive it there. Screw it.
What is it? Just Canada? Oh, yeah, I'm fine.
Yeah. So while that sucks, it is something to mention.
And we have to talk about it. We don't think it's great.
No,
we just.
No, I'm not condoning it.
No,
it sucks.
It's just it could have been.
But in the grand
way
scheme,
worse. Yeah.
Like I said, it's not like they're increasing my costs on food. Or when gas isn't going up,
right?
You know,
because that affects you dollars every day, not just $1 on a kit you bought this month.
Yep, absolutely.
So yeah, it hits everywhere. But thankfully, all of us have so many models.
Yeah, we've already been sitting on so many piles of models. For the remaining time, we don't have to spend any money.
And so
we'll just work on stuff we have.
You've been working on Hyena, have been working on something or an idea, at least for your Cities of Sigmar.
Yeah, I've got a couple things brewing.
Yeah, and so for people who don't know, in the old Warhammer Fantasy game, Dark Elves were an army, and they were ported into Age of Sigmar, and they now have kind of been folded in, the remnants of them, into the Cities of Sigmar as like a free people.
They have like 5 or 6 kits left over.
And you had an idea to make your own.
Well, so here's the pitch.
Yep.
Cities of Sigmar came out and they cut tons of stuff out of the human side of the faction, right? So like all the the Pistoliers and Outriders,
because they're going back to the old world.
Demigryph Knights, Great Swords, all these models. I had originally bought some of the Bretonnian Foot Knights because the models are super.
The new ones, those are great.
Cool.
Yep.
In order to be new Great Swords, but Great Swords got cut, so they have no home. They aren't anything at the moment. But I was thinking, in terms of like a hobby project, what I could actually do is maybe use them as another unit within Cities of Sigmar, because the aesthetic on them is so different, right? And you could achieve a lot with a paint job. You can convince people of a lot of things. So one of my ideas is because these are knights who have basically pole axes and great big long axes.
And so long as we've talked about when we had the announcement, and then I'll get back to you here, the announcement of entire armies being moved back to old world, units being legends.
Yeah.
And people like, well, I have all these models. It's like, as long as it's an official GW model and you are consistent and you have like the right base size, you really can still use them for anything.
Yeah.
So with that in mind.
Yeah. With that in mind, I have no interest in playing the old world.
Right.
Right. Like I've played fantasy. The old world's no different.
Nope.
It really, really isn't. Maybe they fixed a few.
And we played Conquest, which was no different.
A few troubled, pressure points in the game, but it's basically the same thing. And it's.
Yep.
I had nothing in. If I want to play large rank and file game, I'll just play Total War. You know what I mean? Like,
yep. I'll just play it that way.
I'd rather do it that way.
Yep. Which I love the new DLC, by the way. Anyway, go ahead.
But so I wanted to pick up the Foot Knights. I want to pick up one of the Bretonnian Pegasus Lords Paladins with a lance and make them something. Well, a lot of the stuff that they could have been is gone, and so it's like, well, what do I do with them now? My idea was to run them as like dark humans, not like dark elves, dark humans.
Yeah.
Not really. Just a faction of humans that are more grim than the free guilds are, right? Because free guilds are just like recruited militiamen turned soldier. A lot of them are in shitty equipment. A lot of them are fat. Because that's something. They're not like in shape soldiers.
No,
you know,
it's
like
people.
A lot of them are just people.
Yep.
And so I actually really like some of the knight houses from Old Empire, from the old world. Particularly the Knights of More were so cool to me. Just these like death riders who like worship one of the gods of death, More, which isn't around anymore. But they were like grim, lots of skulls. So it's like, well, I can make these knights like worshippers of More and make them like executioners. So they all have these big axes.
And there's still rules for
yes
executioners, right?
Yes. So the old dark elf executioners, which were called the Harganeth executioners, which are big great swords, are still valid units in Cities of Sigmar. And you know the whole like grim aesthetic with big weapons that decapitate, kind of thing. These guys I think would fit really well with that. And they look so different from the Free Guild guys that you could like see them like, okay, these are not the same thing.
What are they? Yeah.
And they'd be painted differently, and they'd be painted dark color schemes, whatever. And they'd be clearly visibly different, and so it wouldn't be confusing, even though they were humans. It's like they count as these. Well, it needs support units for that, kind of army. So the Pegasus that I'm making, I'm actually going to replace its like feathery wings with maybe like demonic or draconic wings, something leathery, something
spikes on it,
spiky. Make it kind of similar to how some of the dark elf characters had from the old world, where they rode these like
the nightmares,
right? Yeah, which were kind of leather winged Pegasus, dark reflections of a Pegasus, and then maybe make it like fiery, make it look like it's got something else demonic going on, so it makes sense that it have a breath weapon, on the profile. But I could see him, as long as I get the same kind of like height and like silhouette as like a black dragon, he could just be like a dreadlord on a black dragon.
Rules wise.
As long as he fits, it's literally, speaking of base, it's really funny. I'd have to put him on like, I don't know, maybe a 60 or 70 mil base to be the black dragon, because the black dragon is very vertical. Like it's a very tall, like snaky sort of
I don't even know what its standard base is supposed to be now.
I think maybe it's like a 70 or 80 mil kind of round. The Pegasus character came with a 30 by 40 rectangle. It's this big. It's tiny. This is the base he came with. It's this big. It's like rank and file games are dumb. What? It was half of a credit card is what he's me on. Basically. Yeah. That was the base, that this gigantic model with these big ass wings and everything. That's what he's on. The base size. It's hilarious. He will not be on that. He's going on a gigantic 70, 80 mil base to be a dragon. But I'll run that as part of my Cities of Sigmar army. Maybe use the other alternate torso from that kit to make a guy on foot to lead them or something. It's just something to make it visually similar, but clearly not from the army, and then play them that way. I apologize to anyone who actually has Dark Elves, because I'm dooming your faction. Because anytime I do a kit bash project of any kind, within months, those sub-factions or those models get cut. They get sent to Legends. It happens every time. Without fail. Every time.
And as we roll into fourth, whenever Cities gets their update, they'll be like,
so funny. It happens every single time. It happened with my Skaven wolf rats. It happened with my skin wolves that I bought, all Forge World models I bought. It happened when I was fleshing out my great swordman units. I bought a bunch of great swords. I threw in like elf equivalents of some of the white lions. I threw in some iron breakers or longbeards from dwarves to be great swordsmen. It's like a mixed unit, and then they cut the entire unit out of the book. So it's like, now I've got like 100 counts as great swords that just they don't count as anything anymore.
It's what I wonder with Dark Elves, and I know we sort of talked about this before, but since they have not been confirmed as being ported back to Old World, but I wonder if for now they're still with Cities until at least if Malarian ever gets his faction, and then they might kick him out that way, so they'll still be valid in Age of Sigmar. They just might be in a different army.
I would see them more likely having a new type of executioner with a new kit.
That could be.
So it's a similar role, but it'd be then in a different army, and then they'd get rid of the...
And they just AOS all the aesthetic.
But then we get rid of the old world models that are in AOS still. I feel like it's a foregone conclusion that every model that got ported over from...
will eventually...
from Warhammer Fantasy over into AOS is going to go away. I think it's beyond a doubt.
I think except for End Times models.
Yeah,
because the Magath Lords, Nagash.
Yeah, the End Times models were basically released for AOS initially anyway, because they had so little time in Fantasy.
Well, and aesthetically, they were immediately different from the rest of the game.
Look at the Storm Fiends.
Yep.
It's like, what is this? Or the Morghasts that came out for Nagash.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Vampires didn't have anything near that.
No, they looked so Night Haunty and Osiarchy.
So wild. Yep. Yeah. And so, that kind of stuff. That group of things that came out of that.
But otherwise, I agree. Anything that came that had for so long been default on rectangles, I think will eventually leave Age of Sigmar, which we talked about hopefully years ago, and now it's starting to actually happen, and it's okay. I guess it was okay that they did it slowly. But another model that really no longer has a place in AOS 4 that one of our friends, Tara, is using is Malog, who is an Underworld's warband, a little troll boss.
Malog, yeah.
And is not going to have rules going forward. And so she was asking, like, can I still use it? It's, again, yes, it's a GW model.
Yeah.
And then she's like, can it be like a troll boss? I was like, well, Malog might be a she, is a 50 millimeter round. The standard Trog boss is on a 60, so you just gotta one up it, put it on a tactile rock.
He is very small compared to the other.
He's short,
ones. But I would have no problem if you're like, this is my dank old Trog boss.
Yeah,
I'm like, sure is.
Yep, and it's still a great looking model.
Yeah.
And then you just you build up enough of a base, put him up there, and then it's like there you go.
Even only if you want to. Even.
Yeah.
Put him in a bigger base and it'd be fine.
Well, and there's Age of Sigmar. There's a lot less of the modeling for advantage or disadvantage anyway. So you're right. I think if it was like, nobody's going to have a problem with you running that model out there.
Yeah. Especially because it's being cut. It's not going to be confusing anymore.
Yep.
Well, this is Mollog, who's got valid rules.
Who's got his own unit.
Him as this other thing. That's a little confusing. But if it's like Mollog is out, yes, he's this now.
Yeah, no problem. Just a boss guy. Yep.
Fine. But there's plenty of that. It's gonna go around, right? So
I already was the whatever her name, Kagra, whatever, Reavers. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm going to use those as various chaos heroes and sorcerers. Like, yep.
That's what a lot of those Underworld warbands are going to be now. It's just like fancy looking versions of unit leaders and stand in for characters. Are you telling me that you don't think my beast lords that I have painted with double axes aren't just going to be aspiring champions with two axes? Mm-hmm. Like, there's be plenty of that going around. My beasts of chaos are getting rolled into my slaves army.
Yeah, they make good looking Dark Oath.
Yeah, it'll be fine.
Yeah, it'll be fine.
Or chaos warriors even. I can see best horse being chaos warrior.
At the very least, they look an awful lot like executioners, or not executioners. I mean, yeah, but no, Bellicor's guys.
Sure, yeah, I can see that.
That's similar, very similar profile.
Yeah.
Well, I can't remember what they're called now. I just built a bunch of those turrets. Legionnaires, for crying out loud. Yeah. That's what I've been in, as a great big assembly phase with the new Dark Oath stuff. Although I did bust out the airbrush and lay down some early things on the Wilder Fiend.
You picked up a new airbrush, which through various shipping and quality issues, you finally got
one.
Because you picked one up at Adepticon.
Yep.
A nice one even.
Yep.
That is your third or fourth attempt at airbrushing.
And I actually opened this one. Yep.
And for an early attempt at airbrushing, it looks really good, because you started working on your Wilder Fiend, for the new Dark Oath, and it's already looking really, really good.
Yeah.
Very interesting color choices.
Yep.
Kind of yellow, green, and like deep sea blue, and it's
what's interesting is what I've been practicing with. Because all I knew how to do at first was just like primer level, big wide cone, pull the trigger back and go. I found, by the way, can't forget to wear the mask when I'm doing the primer. The regular paint, it's like fine. Mm-hmm. Primer is made of something else. And I was blowing my nose with black powder for like a day. But don't do that, kids. But I looked at a lot of the same colors that I used on the oil wash like Chosen that I did, minus like all the metals. And so I used those same colors. And I thought, well, I'm going to lay them down exaggerated bright first and then oil wash them. But when I did it, I messed with a lot of different things. I did the big overall coats. Then I was like, well, if I really control this trigger, lower the PSI a bit, thin the paint a little bit more, and then go in close, what can I do and not spiderweb? And so that's what I kept doing, was experimenting. So it was different stuff for the flesh. I two-toned them under here, which you couldn't really see in the photo. It's like bright almost like great white shark kind of. And then the horns have that ochre yellow, and then the face is brighter, almost skull colored right now. And then the hands and tail go down into a purple, which was an ink that I sprayed through the brush. But then he was very grayscale and off-white looking. And then all I did is I took the contrast paint, Griff Charger Gray, which is like a green gray, blue-green gray. Mm-hmm. No diluting it, just straight into the airbrush. And when I sprayed it on there, because I was like, well, it's going to dry faster than a contrast normally would coming out of the airbrush. So it won't like settle in the cracks like you want. But it kind of still did. And so the way I sprayed it on there, it just took the really bright, almost off-white gray that I had, and it just ever so subtly green coated it. Looked real nice. I was super happy with that. And then I'm gonna go in there with a hand brush, pick out some details, and again over exaggerate the light, because I didn't do that in my first oil wash attempt. Make the oil wash correctly, and then I'm gonna try it on them and see what it looks like.
How long do you think the project will take altogether to finish? Well, doing it this way.
Doing just the airbrush stuff I did was like half an hour.
Right.
It wasn't much. Like the setup and teardown take as long. Mm-hmm. Teardown really takes as long when you're cleaning everything. But the coats were super quick. Didn't take much paint to cover them the way I wanted. I actually then, when the pot still had stuff in it and I was done, I just grabbed the demon prints that I had and just like threw something on there to see. I think, then by hand, that might be an hour of picking out some details and then bring them up to an exaggerated light, which I didn't do with the Chosen, and then go in with the oil wash. And oil wash is like effortless, really. Like I tried to aim it before, and you just slop it on there, let it run, and then let it dry for a couple hours, and then you can sponge it off. So we'll see how that works on him. I was really inspired actually by Marco Frazoni's Usharon. Mm-hmm. Because he did that where he took the colors up to this really extreme pastel bright. It was like, oh, is that really where he's going with that? But then when he knocked it with that oil wash, it just subtly filtered and blended everything, very rich looking. And then he could go in and just spot highlight stuff. And it was like, oh, that was really effective. Mm-hmm. It's not competition quality or whatever, but for an army that you're going to play stuff, right, that looks really good.
And so this model is not small. He's like Demon Prince size.
Yeah, he's pretty big.
2-3 hours to get him to a really good spot.
Yeah,
that's acceptable.
Yep,
like that's an acceptable amount of time for that kind of quality.
Yeah, and it's a matter of like knowing when to stop, because I have to remember this is just for play. Right. This one is not one that I'm try-harding to display.
Yeah, I mean you're not doing tiny gradients on every single scale. Nope. You're not doing a lot of stuff you would do. We're skipping over a lot of stuff to create overall blends instead of like micro blends.
Yep.
But.
Yeah, not inserting freehand detail or nothing. Yeah.
Which, you could. Do a little. You could do like this kind of work and then do a really good looking face on the model. Yep. And then that would be enough. Well, yeah. You could do very small things. Really well.
If you spend a little time on the face and horns for him, mm-hmm. To just make those detailed, then the rest of him looks good from 3 feet away. That was like a tip that I watched. I can't think of his name now. Might be Tim Swinson. Who's another award-winning painter, but he plays Kill Team. And so he likes that you can just take 10 guys and paint them to the moon, because you're not playing with full army. But he still cheats a bit. And he was like, so there's these little things you can do to really exaggerate the quality. Take each of their heads and paint them really great, and then come up with something that's quicker and simple for the bodies. Mm-hmm. And then a freehand thing here, a decal there that you weather a bit, and then they look smashing, you can still get high contrast without the work too hard. And that's a mindset I have to think about. It's like, these are for my play, so there's a chance to get beat up. Mm-hmm. These are not just sitting there to look pretty on a scenic base. So yeah.
But I do think it's funny is most times that you attempt to do that, where you just do like, oh, this is a tabletop quality thing, ends up being some of your like most striking, most complimented, at least to you.
No,
like
sure.
Models. Like you can have display models, people are like, oh yeah, that's good. There's other, like, yeah, okay. But then like you've got one that's tabletop painted and it looks really good. I'm picturing our buddy Kendar's Catan shard of the Nightbringer. Mm-hmm. The people still comment on how good that looks. And it's like, you were like, that took me like an hour and a half.
Yeah, I monochromatic that and then did blue opposite.
So little effort. And people were like, oh, it's so good, so effective. It's like, thanks.
well, when it's the observers are folks who are used to always looking at army standard, mm-hmm. Game standard, and not display stuff. I found that sometimes it's hard for them to look at a display standard piece and see the effect that the rest of us see, or see what artistic qualities were exaggerated and brought to life there. Whereas when they're used to an army, and then they see something that's striking that would be on the table, that does kind of blow their mind, because they're like, oh, I'm used to always looking at stuff that's like flat or drab or dark, and this has pop.
My wife said that to me the other day. I was working on Crethusa, the Crone Seer, and I was painting her feathers of her wings. Well, if you are painting wings and you're doing feathers and stuff like that, to a high standard, you don't just dry brush them. You go in, you kind of create the texture of the wing, right? Because wings are made up of little tiny little hairs. And while the feathers are huge, exaggerated huge on a miniature, it's still like hundreds of feathers.
It's the death of people,
and do the freehand on them. It actually almost broke a couple of our painter friends, both on the same model.
Magnus.
Magnus. Kaylee's might have been her...
she had a creature caster, I think, that had a ton of feathers too, but she also did a Lord of Change.
Lord of Change, I think, is what she did. This weird, like, green, red, blue on alternating feathers, freehand kind of thing. And it was too much. It's such a huge...
I actually think she had to do more than one Lord of Change total, but yeah.
But woof. But when I'm doing Crethusia, she's little. Like, she's just an elf, right? She's an elf-sized thing with these giant, like, kind of wings, giant for her size. And I've only done the back of one of the wings. And it took me like 4 or 5 hours. I worked with freehand, the texture on
that illusion,
on the wings. And I still need to go a couple more layers to make it brighter, to make it bright enough to like sell it. Because I've only gotten to the point where I've laid in the freehand, basically, the texture. I need to like highlight them all. And I showed my wife this. I was like, here, this is what I've done. She's looking at it. She's like, so she said, she didn't say anything bad about it, but she didn't compliment it either. All she said was, how does it make you feel knowing you spent 5 hours painting this to look like this? And I was like, yeah, I'm not happy about it. Because she wasn't saying it was bad. She says what I was doing, but the appreciation for the amount of work that goes into creating the effect is, I think, lost on some people. Just completely not really understanding what they're seeing or what you did or what makes something good.
Well, in I guess quickly here, and with miniatures, it's such a different medium than a lot of other art. So while a lot of art has now crossed over into miniatures, artists in particular, I have said to you guys, I get conversations with traditional artists who are taking an interest in it. The questions they have aren't necessarily like, is that really art? Or it's not the snotty stuff. It's this real curiosity about, why do you guys go to this effort to create such an exaggerated effect? Like, couldn't you just insert simpler material or whatever? But the thing with miniatures is like, yeah, if you used some sort of glazed medium, you could make it look shiny and reflect light instead of trying to paint the reflected light on. But I'm telling you, on a detail that small, when you're talking 28 millimeter scale, that shine ends up, the detail just gets lost then. And it's just a shiny thing. And so, nope, you have to go in there and create the illusion of shine. With feathers, it's the same. It's like, you have to create every individual little hair. On fabric, you got to put texture in there, otherwise it's just a slab. And while these things you could work on a great big canvas or sculpture, or even a bust, once you're down at that scale, it's like, yeah, you have to do all the stuff that doesn't make sense. And a lot of people don't appreciate what went into that.
To me, it's like looking at something far away, right? In order to like make something stand out to someone looking at something far away, you have to really exaggerate it, because you're not going to see all like the small details from that far away. That's the same thing with a miniature, right? At that scale, picture that as like with how good your eyes are without any kind of tools. It's like looking at something far away.
Yeah,
you need to be able to see the details on the thing far away in order to like. You have to really exaggerate it.
You have to really exaggerate it.
When you bring it up close like that, you have to mimic that. Because if I looked at something under a magnifying glass or something, like, I could have it be more subtle. Right? Because then it's like, oh, now I can see the details, because it's
right. Now the feather was huge.
But like with the naked eye looking at something, it's like you really need to exaggerate certain things to make them visible, to make them not make sense, because they don't make sense when you think about it.
Right.
It's too much.
It is.
But it sells the effect when you're looking at it at that resolution.
You have to sell the effect of the scale that it's supposed to be.
Right.
And so, like, if you just tried to allow light to do the work for you, the details are so small that it doesn't do it. It gets diffused, it doesn't bounce enough, or it bounces a weird size and shape. And so you have to just go in there and paint it with like matte paint and then satin where you know when to use it. And people do still use gloss things in miniature painting when they're doing like a gem or a globe, or like, because that still does that correct. But long story short, one of these artists in particular who was asking me a lot of questions, it was because she was really looking to get a good start to do it herself.
Not necessarily Warhammer, but just painting miniatures.
But she bought the Mortarch of Grief.
Okay.
Yeah, whatever her name is, Ellender. Yeah, and which is that's a tough one to start with. Yeah.
Assembly was harder than it was to paint.
Yeah,
the assembly process of that model was.
And there's a thing. I think artists can get into miniature painting and understand stuff pretty quick. The assembly though is a bear for some of those people. So I'm excited to see what she does with her art concepts translated to a mini like that. Yeah, but it'll be she's consumed a lot of information.
Yeah. Speaking of consuming, I could sure find something to consume myself.
I could consume a lot of masticative substance.
Indeed. Let's eat.
Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed. Check out our new episodes every Friday on Google Podcasts, Spotify, and Audible, or on Podbean. You can also follow myself and Llama on Instagram for more. We are at Hyena Paints Minis and at Llama Paints Minis. Music provided by Kevin MacLeod at incompetech.com. And as always, we'll catch you next time.